Antarctica. You know, it's the most desolate, hostile, and honestly, the least explored continent on our entire planet. It's a frozen desert that's been the source of countless myths and mysteries for centuries. It's a real place, right down there at the bottom of the world. But here's the catch. You can't just go. So what's the deal? Why do all the world's nations guard this massive ice-covered landmass like it's some kind of hidden treasure? Are they hiding something from us? Well, today we're going to take a journey to the frozen south and try to sort the wild stories from the actual truth. All right, let's dive right in. To understand the secrets, we've got to go back to where the whole idea of Antarctica even came from in the first place. See, for hundreds, even thousands of years, long before anyone had ever laid eyes on it, people were convinced a giant southern continent had to exist. And this wasn't based on some sailor's tale. It was based on logic, on a fundamental need for balance. And this takes us way, way back. We're talking about the ancient Greeks, who were actually the first to put this whole idea on the map, both literally and figuratively. So check this out. You've got Aristotle, way back around 350 BCE. He's looking at the world and he figures, okay, the Earth is a sphere, right? So if we have all this land up here in the north, there has to be a big chunk of land down south to balance it all out. It was just a philosophical requirement. Then, 500 years later, the legendary geographer Ptolemy takes that idea, makes it official, and actually draws it on his map of the world, calling it Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. For centuries, this unknown southern land was just a myth. But then, as explorers started sailing the globe, some really weird maps started to appear. Maps that seemed to show the impossible, and they're still fueling conspiracy theories to this very day. And this is the big one. The famous Piri Reis Map from 1513. People who believe in these theories claim that the bottom part of this map shows the coast of Antarctica, but without any ice. So the question is, how on earth could someone in 1513 know what that looked like centuries before the continent was even officially discovered? Well, here's the thing. As cool as that sounds, it's not Antarctica. Historians and map experts have pretty conclusively shown that it's actually the coast of Patagonia down in South America. Back then, they hadn't fully explored the coastline, so Piri Reis was just compiling info from other older maps and, well, he made a mistake. He just kind of kept drawing the coastline, guessing what came next. It's an amazing map, don't get me wrong, but it's not proof of an ancient ice-free civilization. Okay, so you think mystery solved, but then this map shows up just a few years later. And this is why the mystery just won't die. The Orontius Finaeus map shows a huge southern continent, and get this, its shape, with its rivers and coastline, looks shockingly similar to modern maps of what the land under all that ice actually looks like. A map like that, well, it needs a pretty wild theory to explain it. And boy, did it get one. This map became a key piece of evidence from one of the most incredible theories ever proposed about our ancient past. It's called Earth Crust Displacement. Now hang with me here. The basic idea is that the entire solid crust of the Earth, the part we're standing on, isn't totally locked in place. The theory suggests it can actually slip and slide, all in one piece, over the molten core below, kind of like the loose skin on an orange. So in the 1950s, a professor named Charles Hapgood comes along with this mind-bending theory. He says, what if Antarctica wasn't always at the South Pole? What if it was once in a nice, warm part of the world and was home to an advanced civilization, maybe Atlantis? Then, around 12,000 years ago, some cataclysm happens and the whole crust of the Earth shifts, violently shoving their continent down to the South Pole, where it flash freezes, burying their cities and their maps under miles of ice. Okay, so from a modern scientific standpoint, this is pretty much impossible. We know continents move, sure, but through plate tectonics, and that is incredibly slow. We're talking centimeters a year. A rapid shift of the whole crust is not something geologists think can happen. But the idea of a lost, frozen civilization, man, that was just too compelling a story to let go.
All right, let's jump forward in time. This is where things get really interesting, because those ancient myths start to collide with modern armies, geopolitics, and secret military operations.
So you've got to keep three big events in mind. First, the Nazis send expeditions down there right before World War II. Then, just after the war, the US launches this massive naval operation called Highjump. And finally, a little over a decade later, the world's powers all get together and sign the Antarctic Treaty, which basically locks the continent down. Yeah, the conspiracy theories say the Nazis were looking for ancient artifacts or building a secret fortress. The historical reality, it's way less exciting, but it makes a lot more sense. Germany was gearing up for war and they were desperate for resources, especially whale oil. It was crucial for making things like glycerin for explosives and lubricants for their war machines. And Antarctica was the best whaling spot on Earth.
Then you've got Operation Highjump, led by the legendary Admiral Byrd. Now, if you spent any time on the internet, you've probably heard about his so-called secret diary. The story is incredible. It claims he flew through an opening at the pole into a hollow Earth, met a super advanced race living inside, and they warned humanity about nuclear weapons.
But here's the reality check. There is no secret diary. It doesn't exist. His own family, the people who manage his actual historical papers, have said over and over again, it's a complete fabrication. The story was just made up decades after he died by authors trying to sell some sensational books. It's pure fiction. So if it's not Atlantis or Nazis or a secret entrance to the center of the Earth, what is the real reason Antarctica is so restricted? Well, the answer, funnily enough, is the Cold War. You see, after World War II, everybody suddenly wanted a piece of Antarctica. Countries were literally racing to plant flags and claim huge chunks of territory for their resources. It was really starting to look like the continent could become the next big flashpoint for another world war. So 12 nations, including the big rivals, the USA and the Soviet Union, got together to figure this out. And what they came up with was brilliant: the Antarctic Treaty of 1959. This thing is one of the most successful international agreements ever. It basically says, nobody owns Antarctica, no military bases, no new claims on land, no mining for oil or minerals. It is a continent set aside purely for peace and for science, period. So the continent isn't off limits to hide a secret, it's protected by law to prevent a war. And what about all those weird pictures from Google Earth, right? The alien pyramids, the crashed UFOs. Well, that so-called pyramid, it's a Nunatak, the peak of a mountain sticking out of the ice sheet that's been carved into a sharp shape by wind and ice. The crashed UFO, it's a big boulder that fell down a mountain. And the secret alien bases, they're just natural ice caves that form and collapse all the time. So look, the wild stories about aliens and lost civilizations are just that, stories. But that absolutely does not mean Antarctica is without its secrets. In fact, it's holding on to what might just be the greatest scientific treasure chest on our planet. Because the real mystery isn't some fantasy tale. It's about what's actually down there, buried under 2 miles of solid ice. What fossils of creatures we've never seen, what records of Earth's ancient climates, what secrets of our own planet's evolution are just sitting there, perfectly preserved, waiting for us to find them. That is the true unknown southern land, and we are only just beginning to scratch the surface.